We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for being flexible this evening. We obviously did not want to cancel this month's Eco Talk because there had been so much preparation put into it and a significant number of folks that were registered to attend the in-person lecture. And as we all began to watch the weather yesterday, I started to get emails, and obviously city offices had to close early, and a significant number of those are closed even tomorrow. And so we appreciate you, the attendee, being flexible and joining us tonight. But most importantly, I want to thank Harold Ennis for joining us. He is our facilitator this evening. And after I read his bio, we're going to get started. I want to remind everybody that we have turned off the chat, but please, as Harold presents, type your questions into the Q&A while you think about them. And at the end of his presentation, we will ask him the questions. And I have just looked very briefly through his PowerPoint, and it is full of great information. And he has actually shared the PDF of the PowerPoint with us. So I'll be able to place that somewhere where you guys will be able to look at it as well, because it is full of valuable information that you're going to want to have for your vegetable garden. Harold is a master gardener and was in the intern class of 2011. He also completed advanced training certifications in vegetable gardening and plant propagation. He's been an intern advisor 6 years of his 10 as a master gardener. And Harold began gardening with his grandmother in the 1950s in Shawnee, Oklahoma. He lived with her while attending college and got a great education in vegetable gardening. He now has a vegetable garden in Southlake that is 10,000 square feet, which he has maintained since 1990. Harold, welcome, and I will turn off my video and let you take the screen.
Okay. Well, I wish we were in person because it's a lot more fun. Hang on just a second. Okay. So just know that I'm glad to be here, and also TRWD, Tarrant Regional Water District, supports Master Gardener Association. And we support them. So I got a little bit of advertisement here. This presentation is supported by our regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District. TRWD maintains 4 lakes, and you see them in this picture. And pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet drinking water standards for our communities. They also work with many of our cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, Grapevine, to provide water conservation programs to the community. So conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet needs of growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double by in the next 50 years. That's why TRWD supports many programs that help save water. That's the best tactic or strategy that we can use right now to make sure that we have enough water for those folks that are still here 50 years from now. That is why TRD supports those programs. SaveTarrantWater.com. You see that website in the black letters. You can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler system checkup, where a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife and the Master Gardeners from Tarrant County. Be sure to check out the SaveTarrantWater.com. So we'll start in with vegetables, and we should we'll finish up within the hour, and then have questions. Essential elements for a vegetable garden: you have to have a site, someplace to put it. You have to have sun. If you don't have sun, then you're not going to grow many vegetables. Seed, basically, what kind of a seed, what kind of varieties am I going to plant? Season, when do I plant? In the fall, in the spring. Everything has a date that it's best suited for, and we'll talk more about that. And soil. And we'll talk a lot more about that. So here's a picture of my garden in 2016. The actual garden is about 1/4 of an acre total. And I have a 2-acre lot to have all that. I'm fortunate in that the land slopes from the upper left here to the lower right. That way I can really use just an irrigation ditch beside some of the plants to water the whole line. Okay. So if you don't have 2 acres and don't have enough time to maintain a big garden, here's a garden that we have at Heritage Elementary School. It's across the street from Colorville Heritage High School. So we do I do a garden club once a month with the 4th and 5th graders mainly, and they plant different kinds of vegetables in these planters here. So that's Western red cedar, and it's 2 boards high. That's about 11 inches high, and it's filled with dairy mix from Alpine. So if you don't have space for those raised beds, then you can do it. You can garden in pots. And this picture was taken, I believe, in December. It was inside a greenhouse that it's really not insulated. I do have a little heater in there, a little catalytic heater. So if it gets down to 19 degrees, everything is toast. But just know that the bigger the pot, if you can compare these plants, it was a good picture to say, the bigger the pot, the better the plant, okay? So just remember that. We'll talk more about pots. Okay, site selection. So number one, you really need to have at least 6 hours. If you're going to grow some, and some crops will take more than that, like tomatoes and okra, squash, and we'll talk more. The garden orientation, whether it goes north, south, east, west, I haven't noticed that it really makes a big difference. It makes a difference if you plant the tall stuff on the north side of your garden and the shorter on towards the sun. Okay, soil. If you're on top of a rock bed or on top of the driveway, then you're going to have to import soil. And most of us will probably have a lot of clay in our soil, so we'll recommend some compost to that. Access is important. I think having the garden in my backyard is great. Growing up at home in Midwest City, Oklahoma, we tried gardening out at a few miles away, and that really didn't work out well. It started out real nice, and the weeds all of a sudden took over. Drainage is important. Proximity to trees and shrubs, that's important. my situation, I have some eastern red cedars along one fence line. And I'm here to say that the roots, normally you expect the roots to go out to the drip line. The eastern red cedar goes out 2 or 3 times that drip line. So just know that if you have trees close by, they're going to absorb a lot of water and they're going to absorb a lot of nutrients. So also water is important. The easier it is to access water, the more success you're going to have. And wind protection, we'll talk more about that. First thing, once you've decided your site, do a drawing of it so that you know what you're going to plant and consider the mature size of the plants and sketch it out to scale if you can. And also trellising, if you're in a small space, then know that you can double or triple your space just by using a trellis. And that's good for a lot of different products, such as climbing beans, cucumbers. You can grow cantaloupes on that fence, but that's where that's a good use for pantyhose. So you support the fruit with a pantyhose so it won't fall off the vine. Okay. Sun, you got to have sun. This particular picture was taken in Aberdeen, Washington at sunrise. So here's the light requirements of common vegetables. So these require bright sunlight. So you notice the okra, the broccoli, the tomatoes, potatoes, squash. I'd say these vegetables, you want to have probably 8 hours of sun during the growing season. Okay, so you can do a sun survey. Just know when the sun hits that pole and when it goes off of it. Okay, here's some. So if you're challenged, like some of, I know I used to live in Grapevine and had a small lot that had 30 trees on it, and I was not able to grow anything because it was like 90% shade. But here's some that will tolerate some shade. So if you're down to the 6 hours of sun, or maybe a little less, then these really, a lot of these are considered cole crops, C-O-L-E. And they do better than those other vegetables that we just looked at. If you eat the roots or eat the leaves, then it's probably something that you could try in your shady garden. So I do a garden club, like I said, at Heritage, and how fast things mature is very important to us. And know that, so if you're going to garden with children, they want, obviously want things right away. Because you'll plant seeds today and tomorrow they'll be looking for them to come up. And sometimes it takes a little longer than that. And certainly they want to go out and pick something next week, but that doesn't happen. So here's some, and you'll get a copy of the copy will be made available to you for of this PowerPoint. So you'll be able to go back and visit this slide. Okay. Maturity rates. Okay, here's again some that take a little longer. Broccoli is a good one because the students can plant broccoli in September or in March and pick or in September or February, and then they can pick the broccoli while they're still in school that semester. So it's a great crop if you're doing a school garden or gardening with kids. Because you get a big head at first, and then after you pick that, it sends off side shoots. So you get multiple pickings with broccoli, as you do some of these others. Tomatoes, you plant those in March, and they come ripe in June. So it's really not a good product for a school garden, but if you have grandchildren or children, then that's great. Same for okra. It takes a little longer for that to grow. And besides, you don't plant okra until about April, because it needs to be warm. And we'll talk about that. How warm does it need to be? Okay, so here's what do we normally plant? What do you want to plant in your garden? And my number one answer to that is, what do you eat? What do you like? Or what does your wife like? Or your mother or your mother-in-law like? So make sure somebody in the family likes it. So, if they don't like collards, then don't plant them. And same for succession and rotation. We won't spend much time on that, but just know that the rotation plan, you do it by plant families. So like tomatoes is in the Solanaceae family, along with potatoes, eggplant, and potatoes. So you would not rotate those crops one after the other. You want to mix them around in your garden year after year. So give them a different place to grow. And the size, will it fit? And that's a very common error that we see. Adapted to our climate. Okay, so use recommended varieties for North Central Texas. Okay, and we are going to take a little trip here to the, okay, this is aggie-horticulture.tamu.edu. And I really like this website because it will give you the ability after we're done with this class to go back and answer your own questions through this website. So again, aggie-horticulture.tamu.edu. And I'm going to click on vegetable resources. And there it opens to another, and I'm going to click on easy gardening fact sheets. Here's a series of fact sheets that go through several different vegetable types. And I'm going to open one, let's say carrots. So there's a fact sheet for carrots, and it tells you the benefits of carrots, the site selection. It likes sandy soil. If you have, like we have here, heavy soils, then you're going to grow a short variety of carrot, one that doesn't get 9 inches long, but just maybe 4 to 6 inches. How to soil preparation, okay. And varieties, just know that this varieties here in these fact sheets would be for Texas, so it's not necessarily for North Central Texas, and we'll visit that in just a little bit. Okay, how to plant them, fertilize them, watering, care during the season, and weeds, and harvesting, okay, have insects and diseases. And know that, so and that's common. They give you pictures of some of those insects and gives you some idea of what to do about it and how to store them. So it's really a quite complete fact sheet on each vegetable. See if we can go back to, yeah. Okay, just know that there's other like composting, okay? Just know that there's other fact sheets here. Soil solarization, we get that question a lot. Watering your vegetables and so forth, okay? Let's go back one step. There's the easy gardening that we clicked on. The next will be vegetable variety. And here I will click on region B. That's where we are, North Central Texas. And I will also select all vegetable varieties. You can be specific, but here's vegetable selections for region B, North and Central Texas, okay? So if I was going to plant bush beans, here's a list of beans, bush beans that will do well in North Central Texas, okay? I typically I grow top crop, tender crop, early contenders, and I've grown Blue Lake. All of those are really very productive. And notice how fast, that's 50 days after I plant the seed, I should be picking some beans, okay? So that's a good crop for children to play with. Now, my advice would be when you buy seeds, take this list to the seed store and try to pick varieties that are on this list, okay? And you will have better success. Excuse me. Yes. Just needed to make adjustment there, sorry. Okay, so there they are, and there's all kinds of vegetables. And note that with tomatoes, here's they've broken it into large and medium, paste, and small. So my favorite small tomato would be Juliet. Juliet is very productive. I mean, very productive. But you better have some room because I grew a plant a couple of years ago that when I took it out of the greenhouse, it was 15 feet long. My favorite of the big tomatoes would be big beef. That makes, I typically will average the first couple of pickings. The tomatoes will average at 1 pound each. And I can fill up a 3-gallon bucket from 2 plants. So it's a very productive, and it's got a smooth top. You take one slice off the top and you're ready to take the next slice to your hamburger. Okay, so that's vegetable varieties. That's the kind of varieties that we plant that will have the best success. So you can take that to the Mike's Garden Center or Marshall Grain, or look in the seed catalogs, Park Seeds or Burpee or one of those others, okay? Okay. The other, I want to just quickly go to, and the problem solver You notice that it has tomatoes and Kirkabits, and that's so it needs some expansion, but just know when you click on tomatoes, and we get a lot of questions. Here's tomato disorders. So if I click on ripe fruit, so you notice green fruit, ripe fruit, so different classes or area that the disease has hit, and it comes up with some really nice pictures that you can match up to your circumstance. And blossom end rot is very common. It's caused by bacteria that splashes up. So I clicked on blossom end rot, and it gives you the symptoms and how to control it, okay? You just want to make sure that you're not bouncing water off the soil up on the leaves. That's the most common error that people make. Okay. Okay, so visit that website because there's all the kinds of stuff there that you can, fruit and nut, viticulture, wine growing, and junior master gardener. So you get some ideas of how to garden with children. Okay, we've left that. And so you get I get a lot of questions about GMO, genetically modified organisms or plants. And here's a so this is a depiction of hybrid, okay? So I have two plants or two people, and they produce a hybrid, and there's nothing wrong with this child. So don't unlike GMO, it's don't confuse hybrid with GMO. Okay, season. When do I plant each vegetable type? Here's a kind of a busy sheet, and you could probably get one of these at Marshall Grain or Mike's or a lot of other places, but know that it's a good sheet in that it has the different vegetables down one side, and it tells you basically the planting depth, the distance, but mainly here what I'm after is the spring planting dates. It gives you a window. So if I'm going to plant onion plants, I'm going to plant them. I'm not sure if it's onion plants. I'm going to plant them in January. I tell the students that plant onions sets on Martin Luther King Day or about, and plant potatoes on Valentine's Day. So there's Irish potatoes in February. Okay, so February is really a pretty busy month because you can plant broccoli and spinach and kale and mustard greens and a lot of other things like that. So there's the spring planting dates. I would caution on cauliflower. I do not plant cauliflower in the spring because it just, it doesn't have time to mature before it gets hot and it wants to bolt. In the fall, it makes a beautiful plant, makes a beautiful head. So I go for the fall when I plant cauliflower. Okay. One caution I want to show is on tomatoes. This says May 12th, and I'm telling you, if you wait till May to plant your tomatoes, you're not going to get any tomatoes. They just do not have time to mature for the blooms to set and make tomatoes. The basic rule is at 90 degrees, the tomato bloom does not set. So once our temperatures hit 90 on a regular basis, whatever tomatoes are on your tomato plant, that's your crop because it's not going to make any more. So my experience was that at Mayfest, if you're familiar with that, back in when they had the big hailstorm during Mayfest in Fort Worth, it destroyed a lot of my tomato plants, and I replanted on March 7th or 8th. And those plants were barren, no tomatoes, okay? There you go. This is really a handy guide. I try to plant as early as I can because in the spring you're fighting between that last freeze and the 100-degree heat, and in the fall you're fighting between the 100-degree heat and the first freeze. So you got to adapt. Okay, here's the I hope you're seeing the whole. I'm getting this header up that's hiding part of my screen. This is what temperatures are best for the different plants. So if I'm going to plant seeds, okay, this is for seeds. Yeah, what I can't see is really the no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, I think this is 40 degrees. And that's soil temperature. So to get the soil temperature, I have a little meat thermometer that I just push down into the soil, and that's the temperature. I push it about the depth that I'm going to plant the seeds. So the green dots are the practical temperature for planting. Okay, so if I plant at that temperature seeds in the ground, then they will eventually come up. Here's the example I like to use is corn. Okay, if that's 95, 85, 75, 65. This is, I think, 55 degrees. So in early March, if I plant corn, it may take a week or two to come up. That soil's 55 degrees. But in the fall, I plant corn in August, and the soil is like 95 degrees. And this is the optimal temperature, the black dots. And I've had corn come up in 3 days. The seeds germinate and break through the ground in 3 days. Okay. Now I do pre-water the row. So I make the row and water it, and then drop the seeds, and then pour dry soil over the seeds. Okay, so that applies to all these others. Beans, you want to wait till it's about 65 degrees or so, whatever that. You can visit the. Okay, enough of that. Transplants, okay. I use transplants as often as possible. And I tend to that with, if it's economically feasible. I do not do transplants with tomatoes and mustard or okra or black-eyed peas or peas, it just takes a lot of plants to get enough to eat. So you'll spend your whole budget on plants when you could buy a packet of seeds for $2 or $3. But tomatoes, I do transplants, but actually I start the tomatoes in January from seeds so that they're ready to put out in March. And here's some, one other thing, if you're planting seeds and transplanting your plants, I like to use exam gloves because if you, especially with seeds, you can contaminate them with the sweat on your hands. So, and you can damage the plant by picking it up. Just don't pick it up by the stem. Use a cloudy day, and after you set it in place, water it well after transplanting. I'd like to say, my grandmother said, if you plant a plant, water it. I don't care if it's raining, water it. So please remember that. And plant at the same depth as in the pot. So if you plant peppers, then you'd plant it at the same depth. So that soil level in this pot with that soil level in the ground, okay? Now this happens to be a tomato, so there's an exception for tomatoes. You can plant tomatoes. So here's the first 2 Juliets I ever bought, and that's all I could find, so I wanted some of those. And here's a different way to plant. I dug a ditch, a furrow, whatever, and there's the plant. This happens to be dolomite, that white, so it's not snow. And that's adding calcium to the soil. And when I'm done, I'll put that 4-inch pot under the foliage. Don't try to bend the foliage, you'll break the plant. So just support it so that it doesn't lay down in the soil and pick up some disease from the soil. It'll quickly adapt. And there you go. Okay, so some vegetables require indoors, okay? Start from plants. And most of the cover crops are that way. Cabbage, I do from plants, broccoli, cauliflower, but not spinach or mustard greens or kale. Transplants can be started several weeks. Okay, so if you're into that, again, if you're doing seeds in a flat like this, wear your gloves. I actually use tweezers or some kind of a device to pick the seeds up so that I'm not contaminating the seeds. And typically have a 90% plus success rate with starting seeds in the flat. Also use a heat mat under it, so that there's a lot of things to consider. Vegetables, okay, onions, leeks, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, cold crops. Okay, that's what we said. Okay, irrigation is important. And this is actually in my garden. So this is how I do tomatoes. When I first set the tomato out, and I'll show that picture later, I'll have a 1 gallon milk jug over the small plant to protect it. But here's the water line. And there's, this is the cage that I use. They're 18 inches diameter and 5 feet tall. Those in the background here have frost cloth around the tomato cage. And that again gives you a couple of 3 degrees or 4 to 6 degrees, depending on the thickness of the cloth, protection from frost. It also gives you protection from wind and from hail. So I will leave frost cloth on until May. And then just take it off and fold it up and save it for next year. Okay. The water from this hose is directed down. It doesn't come up to the plant. Okay. And direct seeding, basic, you know, that little handout from Marshall Grain shows you or tells you how deep to put it, but basically 3 times the seed width. So here's a little graphic at the bottom. So if the seed, like lettuce, is a good example, you probably, people probably lose more lettuce seed from planting them too deeply than anything else. At the school garden, I have the students spread the seeds on top of the ground, and then we cover them with sifted compost that we've made. It's a fine soil, if you will, so that we can really control how deep the lettuce seeds are planted. Seed packets will also tell you, and keep the seeds moist until plants. Okay, soil. Do not compromise, okay. Let's see, yeah, Neil Sperry said, don't scrimp on the bed prep. The smaller the plant, then the more heroic the soil preparation should be, okay. So like I said, you know, that lettuce plant, we smooth it out really well. We spread the seeds on top, and then we spread really fine soil on top of that. And then make sure that it stays damp while the seeds are germinating. Okay, soil test. And you may want to write this down. I highly recommend you get a soil test. You'll be surprised at what you have, or maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. But here's the where you can go to order soil test. You can also call our help desk, the Master Gardener help desk, and 817-884-1944. I'll say it again, 817-884-1944, and ask for a soil test kit. They'll send you the instructions and a bag, or as many as you need. You just tell them how many. So, but if you go on the website, then you can get the instruction sheet, and you can actually put the soil in any kind of container that will go through UPS or Postal Service. Recommended every 3 to 4 years, and they will come back with recommendations of what you should do. So on the instruction sheet, you tell them what you're going to plant. If it's turf, if it's vegetables, or an orchard, whatever it is, or your foundation beds. There's a place on the form to fill out, and then you get back a report like this. This happens to be for Heritage Elementary School, our vegetable garden. So we took samples out of those beds that you saw early on in the presentation. And here's nitrogen, and that's typical of our soil. And it's typical of if you go to buy product from Alpine or Living Earth or anybody that dumps the soil in your truck and it's smoking, it's consuming nitrogen. That's the chemistry of it. So it's nothing bad about those companies. That's the product. So just know when you buy that product that you're going to have to add nitrogen to have a successful garden. Okay, the other is phosphorus. Okay, sorry. So phosphorus, know that I said dairy mix is what we fill those beds with. So anytime you have a animal waste added, then you're going to have some phosphorus. And this is really way high. I think that says very V high. Okay. And note down here, they say phosphorus. Don't add phosphorus for 5 years. So it takes a long time to work the phosphorus out of the ground, leach out. And our ground naturally has a pretty high percentage of phosphorus, but the soil test will tell you. And so here's the recommendation: nitrogen. Apply an additional 1 pound per 1,000 square feet every 4 to 6 weeks as needed to maintain vegetable growth. That's really common in a vegetable garden. So just know that if you're growing vegetables, that every month you should add, you should feed them some nitrogen, whether you're organic or whatever you are. Just know that you can't just plant the seeds and hope that that plant's going to make you some tomatoes. You'll have to add some something for that plant to eat along the way. So to give you all these different elements, this particular soil test would cost you $12, okay, on the current form that you fill out. Garden soil preparation, okay, so bed amendments, pre-plant irrigation, fertilization, seed bed preparation, okay. So remove the weeds, amend the organic matter, okay. Organic matter to me that's the most important thing that you can do to our soil here. Don't compact the soil. Ideal pH is 6.0 to 7.5. Some parts of Tarrant County have pHs up to 8. We're lucky here. If you have oak trees in your yard, you're probably close to 7, maybe a little bit less. 7 is the 0 point. For below 7, it's acid. Above 7, it's alkaline. So most plants will do well, except blueberries want it down at 4.5, something like that. So if you're going to do blueberries, do them in pots with shredded pine bark. Okay, don't work the soil when wet, and it may take a while to get your soil prepared. Okay, clay soils. There you go. I used to see this in Oklahoma, right, or regularly. Raised beds. Okay, add organic material. So you'd add just a lot of compost, at least 3 inches depth. And if you add 3 inches of compost to 100 square feet, an area 10 by 10, it takes 1 cubic yard. Not exact, but it's close enough, okay? So just know that you can measure it. I'm going to add 3 inches. So if you have 500 square feet, then you might want to add 5 yards of compost. And most of those companies will deliver it to your yard, to your house, if you don't have a truck or if you want to go that big. You can add sand to it. Okay, so solutions for, so clay soils really maintain this, they're slow to drain. Sand, it won't hold water. And the solution for that, add organic material. Isn't that neat? Whatever it is, add organic material. Work the soil down to 6, I say work it down as far as your tiller will go or your shovel will go, and work in that compost or organic material. You know, some people just will work in their leaves in the fall. You want to do it early in the fall because you want those leaves to be decomposed by the time you start planting. Remove all the debris. Okay, there's another soil test. So there's, I think this is my own here. Yeah, no, it's heritage. This is the first time I did, and look where nitrogen is. So we added some from that this time until that other soil test. So in the spring, so this is, actually this was in 2016, but today that's how my garden, where I'm going to plant tomatoes. So there's all that dark material is compost. I'll add 2 cubic feet per tomato in the row. Okay. So there's 20 tomatoes in a row, 40 cubic feet. And I make my own compost. So just know that it's important. Okay. Again, improving clay soils, you can add sand, but the organic material. So, you know, this is good winter activity. You get a nice day, you go out and you don't have to sweat so much, and you have a nice breeze and get out of the house. Okay, here's some ideas. So if in the fall or the spring, you can do a row cover. So looking under that row cover, you see the plants are happy, but just know you have to support it so that the row cover is not laying on the plant itself. This again is frost cloth, and it's just a lightweight cotton material that is not plastic. And it breathes and it lets in rain. And you can leave it on in the sun and the plants will do fine. Okay, so there's mulch is important. There's the hose, there's the plant, there's the mulch. Okay, so there's again protection for those little plants. Okay, here's the jugs. This is again my garden. Right after planting, 1 gallon jug. Once the plants, and note that the lid is not on the jug, otherwise you'll steam them and you'll have little steamed tomato plants. Once the tomato comes out of the top, then I remove the jug. But I generally will put the cage around it, put the irrigation down beside it, mulch it, and then take the lid off. Or the jug. Okay. Okay, we're getting close to the end. Yeah. Here's wind protection. Okay, so the frost cloth is a wind protection, it's a bug protection, it's hail protection. It's just a great thing to do. With the tomatoes, I'll cut these limbs off. I will trim that once the tomato gets some height. I'll trim the lower limbs so that rain doesn't hit the soil and bounce up to the plant. That's a good way to get the early blight. if you're planting seeds, here's a good device. In fact, I have that set out right now. Here it is. This hose is fed through that, and I can make it go for 5 minutes every morning at 6 a.m. Keeps the bed, and you notice there's some little seedlings coming up there. So that's a great investment if you're trying to do small seeds in direct seeding in the ground. Okay, that's the end of the short program.
Harold, thank you so much. That was a lot of content. I know that our attendees will appreciate being able to have the slideshow to go back and look. I took some notes myself, but I know that that PDF will come in handy to use as reference for sure. We have just a couple of questions. Let's see. One is, have you seen weather, temperatures, rainfall, or other changes over the years here in North Texas? And if so, do you have recommendations about plants that are having trouble in our current climate?
If you'll read that again.
Sure. Have you seen weather or temperatures and rainfall or other changes over the last few years here in North Texas? And if so, do you have recommendations about plants that are having trouble in our climate?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've seen those events for the last 30 years. So I don't know if it's any different now, but you know, I lost some. Well, last year, you know, the years before 2021, I grew broccoli and cabbage and Brussels sprouts that I planted in September. I picked in February and March and April, and they all died in February last year. You know, well, all you do is just, you know, it's February, I can plant again as soon as it gets beyond that single digit temperatures.
Right.
So yeah, those cold crops, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, most of them will survive down to 25 degrees.
Okay.
So I have broccoli out there right now, but they're under those little gallon jugs. And they will probably survive. They've been out about 2 weeks.
So when you have seedlings, do you put the little jugs or you use the cups over them? You don't have frost cloth over seedlings unless supported by a tunnel, right?
But you could put frost cloth. Last year I did frost cloth over onion sets the first time ever. And they all survived.
Okay.
So, and other folks lost, we had a bunch in our demo garden that got frozen.
Okay.
Mine survived, and I'd planted them in January, middle January, and that event was middle February. So they'd been out for a month.
Wow.
But they survived. I lost some of the landscape plants too, but you know, that's not our topic today.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Okay. So just knowing when seeds can be planted, you have referred folks, like you got your planting guide from Marshall Grain, right?
Yeah.
That gives you a good idea of when seeds can be planted, right?
Yeah. And you know, the temperature chart, I say temperature trumps the date. Okay. So right. If I, like 2 years ago, I planted tomatoes on February 28th. I set the plants out in the garden because I looked at the 10-day forecast. It looked like it was going to be mild. Everything was, you know, plus I'm giving them a lot of protection. I put the jug over it and I put frost cloth around it. So I'm giving them about 5 to 8 degrees protection.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, what variety of blueberry have you grown in pots?
What varieties of
Blueberries?
blueberries?
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
I have not grown blueberries in pots. Um, my experience was I talked with the guy that has um, Metro Maples is the company in Mansfield, and they grow Japanese maples,
Mhm.
but he also has a lot of other plants, azaleas, and he had blueberries. I said, okay, how do you grow them? Because he had them in pots.
Yeah.
And he said 100% shredded pine bark mulch. It's high acid, and and you're going to have to keep it watered. But that's so if you want to do that, that's what I say. Use the bigger pot, the better.
Mhm.
But pine bark mulch will probably do the trick.
Okay, good to know. Um, have you ever had trouble with squash vine borer?
Yeah.
She said
Yes, I don't
she
shoot them.
killed all of her pumpkin vines last year.
I've tried a lot of different things, you know, there's some recommendations, but I haven't found anything that's a sure shot.
What do you
Uh,
recommend? I mean, just in general, what are you?
Excuse me.
Mhm.
Okay.
What do you attempt to curb them with, or what do you
Yeah,
try?
I've got as strong as 7.
Okay.
Uh, and with, if I'm gonna put 7 on a vegetable, with squash, I will pick down to the smallest available and put the 7 on it. You know, they say 2 days, I think,
Uh-huh.
before harvest, but if I pick down to the smallest, then I'm gonna get 5 to 7 days before it's time to pick again.
Okay.
And those little plants, and I'm gonna wash them from then on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I like to use a called triple action. It's neem oil, and it has BT in it and a fungicide. So you get all 3 in one shot, and that's usually my go-to if I have like fungus and you know some kind of a worm. BT will kill about any kind of a worm, and it's organic Basilicus thuringiensis, and you can buy it in a lot of different forms.
Okay, and do you get those, the neem oil and the other items, do you get those primarily at Marshall Grain, or where
No,
you?
you can buy it. That's made by Fertilome.
Okay,
The one I use, but
okay,
you can buy similar products, and you can buy it at Lowe's or Mike's or Marshall Grain.
okay.
Yeah.
And your frost cloth, it looks like you've got huge rolls of it, or great, do you order that from Amazon, or where do you get it?
Yeah, maybe from Amazon, because sometimes I will find it in a garden store, but not often. We used to sell it to our master gardeners at our office. Our former agent would buy it by the case, and but it comes in a roll of 50 feet or 100 feet by 6 foot wide.
Okay,
So depending on the temperature rating, the thickness of the cloth.
okay.
It's kind of like, well, I don't know the term that you'd use when you're sewing and you have a material that you really, uh, that you use kind of stabilize your real material that you're working with.
Okay.
I guess I might have to talk to a seamstress to figure out what that's called.
To use the right term. When you plant like the raised beds at like at the school, do you suggest those to use raised beds for folks that might have problems with moles in their yard?
With moles in the raised bed at
No,
school,
just in
no.
general. I mean, if a location is prone to having moles, do you suggest that gardeners use raised beds?
Yeah, no, I have moles at my property now, and they get into my garden some.
Uh-huh.
They seem to like the grass better, and I have traps that I got at Foreman's.
Okay.
That kind of a guillotine type trap that shoots spikes down into the ground.
Oh, okay.
So Foreman's can help you with that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if Marshall Grain has them, but yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Nicole says we have Bermuda grass, and how do you keep it from overtaking your gardens?
Yeah, so when I raised, yeah, in my garden, I will do a perimeter of glyphosate. I do not use it in the garden, but I will perimeter with glyphosate and keep the Bermuda grass from spreading into the garden.
Okay.
When that last picture of the small garden with the sprinkler going, so there I dug down, dug as much of the Bermuda and grass seeds out as I could. And I tilled it, and then I put cardboard over that.
Mhm.
And then I built the bed over the cardboard.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then I filled the bed with compost or soil mix, okay?
Yeah.
So I've got about a year or more for those seeds and weed seeds and roots that I buried
Yeah.
to die
Yeah. Okay.
before the cardboard decomposes. So the second year, the roots of my plantings will go on down into the native soil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that's the way we did the school garden also.
Okay. And yeah,
So
I mean,
cardboard, anytime you're taking over a new area like that, put cardboard and it'll kill the grass. It's a
Okay.
good prevention.
Good. Yeah, when you and I first spoke about you teaching the vegetable gardening class, you talked to me, about the importance of the soil and preparation of the soil, and even just the timing of this class, because we need to make sure that our soil is right before we even move into, putting the seeds or the seedlings in the ground.
Yeah, you saw the soil that was in those raised beds at Heritage. It looked great,
Yeah.
but boy, the test came back, nitrogen was, really small.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the soil test is important. When I plant tomatoes in pots, and I do that in the fall, I use pots for the tomatoes because before that, I rarely got very many tomatoes in the fall before it froze. So now I can just roll the pot into the greenhouse or the garage or whatever. And I use 100% compost in those pots.
Oh, okay.
So if you're not, if you don't have that available, then mushroom compost that you can buy the bag is probably a very good alternative. Bill Adams, who wrote the book Tomato Lover's Handbook, uses 100% mushroom compost in his garden.
Okay.
He's got a picture of unloading a tractor trailer load. He was former agent down by A&M.
Uh-huh.
So, he was serious about growing vegetables.
Well, for sure. And so you talked about having your tomatoes in pots.
Yeah.
And do you prefer growing them in a larger, like a 3-gallon pot, if you were to put tomatoes in pots?
No, I say that the minimum,
Yeah.
unless you're doing a patio tomato, the minimum is 15 gallon.
Okay.
And you saw that one picture, the three, one was 50, one was 20, one was 30.
Oh, okay.
And there was a difference in the size. When I dumped that soil, that's soil, you're rotating crops. You can grow the tomato plant in that for 2, maybe 3 years, but don't just keep planting tomatoes in the same pot. I just take the pot, dump the soil in my garden and fill the pot up again. So I've rotated the soil essentially in my pots.
Oh, okay.
And
That makes sense.
then, so I could dump it out every year. But
Yeah.
when I dump it out, the root structure of the plant at the bottom of that pot is just like a potted plant. It
Really?
is solid on the bottom.
Huh. Interesting.
So that's the kind of root structure tomato has.
Yeah.
It'll fill up a 30-gallon pot.
Oh, for sure. Yes, obviously. Okay, well, I think we've answered everybody's questions. If you have additional questions, feel free to send me an email and I will get those questions to Harold. You'll get a follow-up email once this lecture is over, and it will provide you with my email address. We want to invite you to attend next month's lecture. We're hoping that it will be in person. So Joyce Connolly from Marshall Grain will be talking about native Texas plants. And I know you guys won't want to miss out on that. I want to thank Harold again for his flexibility and sharing his vast knowledge with us on this topic. And we appreciate your time, Harold, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you. It
Thank
was a
you,
pleasure
everybody.
being with you.
Have a good evening.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.